Hello everybody, Baruch Hashem, we're here again today. We're continuing in the Sikha. This is special for the Jewish women. It's, let's see, one what it said. It's from the talks of Shabbos, the Torah portion Bo, the 6th of Shevat, and Shabbos, the Torah portion Beshalach, the 13th of Shevat, 57-52. And we're reading a translation. This is the only really complete translation up to date that I've seen of the last words the Rebbe spoke, and it does a great job, and he put footnotes, and we're using this to learn from this so we don't have to look at the Hebrew, because a lot of people don't understand Hebrew. So anyways, this is a very, very special book. It's talking about the most special things that ever happened. As I say, like we talked about before, that it's the highest of highest times. There were now times when everything's been done, and we're right standing in front of Moshiach, and spiritually everything's finished. And we're waiting any second, which should happen any second. There's no reason it shouldn't happen. We should be in the third base of Mikdash. So this is the highest Torah of this highest time that was ever said by the highest person who ever existed, which is Rebbe Moshiach. And this, now we're talking about who's this most special of everybody. It says the Jewish women and the Jewish girls. And he talks about this, and he explains about this, that really, when the Rebbe talks about the Frierdiker Rebbe, he's also talking about himself. But he explains that the Frierdiker Rebbe was the first leader of the Jewish people who started to say that we have to teach women, because before that, women basically they just stayed at home and learned how to do stuff to raise the family, which is very important. But they weren't educated. It wasn't a thing to do. But he was the one who started it, and the Rebbe Mamish pushed it more and more. And the Rebbe explains over here the reason for this is really because we're in times of Moshiach, and the women are very important, because it's from the women just like the women who they left Egypt, like we're going to explain shortly about Miriam, was because of the women we redeemed from Egypt. The same thing is that the women now, the women in our generation are the same women as the women who left Egypt. This is according to the Riyah Kodesh. And they're gonna take us out there. It's a special. They have a special merit, special righteousness that they have. Will bring the final redemption and take us out. So Rebbe is right. This sikha is very, very much is giving strength and to mechazek, the strength of women, that they should really do much more and more, because they have the capability to mamish more than anybody else to bring us to the final Gula Shlema. And the Rebbe also points out that in reference to the women, that we're also like Hashem's wife. So just like the women bring the redemption, we as a Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, are Hashem's wife. So we also have a special thing that for us is to bring the redemption. So, okay. So we also talked about the greatness of lighting Shabbos candles. That by lighting the Shabbos candles, you bring light in the whole world. And this includes the light of Hashem, like we talked about earlier, that all lights are revealed, the specialness of lighting Shabbos candles. It's another thing that only in our generation do so many women light Shabbos candles. It used to be just the woman of the house. Now everybody, this is something that was started by the Rebbe Moshiach years ago. And I thought the good stories. Okay, now we're right now on page 151, number 4. And we may add that the virtue of the Jewish women is emphasized also in the Torah portion of Beshalach, as in the calendar outlay of many years, that the yahrzeit occurs in the week of the Torah portion of Beshalach. So now we have here something that has to do with this week's Parshas, with Torah Beshalach and the Jewish women. In the Torah portion of Beshalach, the Torah discusses the Song of the Sea. This is the famous time when the Jews left Egypt, and when they left and they walked through the Red Sea. And there were the famous, after that they walked through the Red Sea. It's a famous song from Moshe saying that we say every day in our prayers, in our morning prayers. So in the Torah portion of Beshalach, the Torah discusses the Song of the Sea. It says, then Moshe and the Jewish people sang. And after this, it talks about how they sang and all the wonderful praises. They sang to Hashem for the greatness that Hashem did. And after this, it says, and Miriam and the prophetess, sister of Aaron, took the tambourine in her hand. And all the women followed with the tambourines and dances. And to them Miriam responded, let us sing to Hashem, let us sing to God. Which in this is emphasized the advantage of the women over the men, since their song was with immense joy. Wow. that with tambourines and dancing and so much excitement, so much so that the righteous women of the generation were certain that Hashem will make miracles for them, and took the tambourines out of Egypt when they left. In other words, they had so much faith in Hashem, and they were so much excited that they wanted to prepare to dance and sing and do everything they could to show joy in dancing, because they know Hashem loves us, and they to celebrate with Hashem. And they were waiting, and they sure this was going to happen. So they were waiting, even though when they went on the, they had to grab everything fast, whatever it was, but they made sure that they took these instruments just so they could praise Hashem. It's interesting. Let's look note 57. A note for at this one, page 52. Note from what is stated in Shemos Rabbah 12:23-7. Singers came first, referring to the Jewish people, and at the end the chanters, referring to the angels. So first it's the Jewish people, and then the chanters were the angels. And between these two, the young women playing tambourines refers to the women who praised Hashem. In the middle, before the angels, and after the men. And it says, and Miriam the prophetess took, meaning the song of the women was before the song of the angels. And the angels listened to the praises of the men, and the women similarly to what it says, friends are listening to your voice, let me hear it. So in other words, it's very special over here. He talks about that the men's, when the sea opened up, they sang praises to Hashem. Then the women sang, and the Malachim were listening. The angels, who we always talk about how they're all singing, we talk about in prayers, how they're singing these beautiful praises to Hashem. They were listening. They were listening to the praises of the Jews, the men and the women. We're going to see something very interesting here. The Rebbe is going to say, we're talking about these great joy, but then we're going to ask a question. Why is Miriam her name has to do with bitterness? And we're going to go and explain about this. It says then that the affliction of the bitterness that we were in Mitzrayim for Radu, I think couple hundred, forget how many hundred, for several hundred years, and we were there, but only the last 86 years we were there became terrible. And this is when Miriam was born, and that's why it says they named her Miriam, because of the bitterness of the Galus that started. So let's go inside. Regarding the explanation for why the song of the women Miriam was much greater joy, we may say. Now the Rebbe is saying what we may say. This is a chiddush. The Rebbe is going to say that because she had so much joy, because she was so bitter and so longing to see the redemption. Let's see it inside. And it says in the Midrash that Miriam was named so due to the mere bitterness, since the main affliction of such slavery as such that they embittered their lives with back-breaking labor was once Miriam was born. For 86 years, which began 4 years before Moshiach was born. In other words, before they went out for Egypt, Miriam was 86 years old, and she was born for it. So we have to. This is a few interesting things. First of all, they named her, the father and her mother, who was the leader of the generation, Amram and Yocheved. They named her because of the bitterness. And second of all, we see that she was only 4 years old when Moshe was born. Now, this is going to be more amazing, because we're going to start to see different things that she saw as a little child. And we explained that because of her, the redemption came. The Rebbe doesn't bring it here, but we know that because what happened is that Pharaoh had made a decree that all the males should die. He didn't know, because of the astrologers didn't know that the agreement of whether the Redeemer of the Jewish people would be from the Egyptians or from the Jews. So he made for everybody. And Miriam came to her, and so therefore Miriam, the head of the nation, Amram and Yocheved, said, how can you have children? They're going to die. So therefore they got divorced, and everybody followed suit. They're the leaders, so everybody followed. So Miriam came to her father and said, you're worse than Pharaoh. For what you're doing, there will be no more Jews. And you're a tzaddik. But Dvar was an evil person. We don't know whether his evil decree will be kept. He said right away his mother and his father got remarried. And then she also, I don't know if she told them then, but she also knew that the Redeemer would come from them. And then they got remarried, and then they had Moshe Rabbeinu. Let's go see inside. Okay, so she was born 86 years. That was the beginning of the difficult time of the redemption, which was 4 years before Moshe was born. We went on 153. And afterwards, and through this, Hashem appointed a Redeemer, Miriam. So it says that because of the redemption, because of the bitterness of the Golus, Hashem appointed a redeemer. It doesn't say Moshe Rabbeinu, it says Miriam. Let's see if it says inside. It says, and note that what is written regarding Yocheved and Miriam, this is number 63, at the bottom of page 153, and he made to for house. This is talking about when we read in the Chumash about how that Yocheved and Miriam were midwives, and they used to help all the Jews being born. So Paro said, if you find a male, kill him or give him to me, get rid of him. And they went back to Paro and they said, well, I'm sorry, they're having babies, but they're like animals. They don't need any help, and they're like animals of the field. And since they put their lives on the line, it says that Hashem made for them houses, and that they explained that priesthood and Levihood from Yocheved and kingship from Miriam. So that from Yocheved came from her children were the Levites, and from Miriam came. It explains later was from base David came from Miriam, because David, it says David descends from Miriam. Thus also redemption was destined to come to our righteous Moshiach from the seed of David is through Miriam. So therefore we have two levels. Miriam was appointed the Redeemer here, as we're going to go on and explain, and Miriam is the great grandmother of the Redeemer. The great grandmother is a direct descendant from David. David is a direct descendant from her. And we may say this is another explanation. The Rebbe is going to tell us something new that nobody ever said before, special for us. The explanation of the words of the Medrash, a Redeemer, Miriam, named so due to the mirror. Mirror means bitterness. For seemingly bitterness and redemption are opposite. How can you name that she's the Redeemer and her name has to do with bitterness? And since redemption was as a result of the fact that Miriam was strongly pained by the bitterness of Galus. So why is it called Redeemer? Mary, why is the Redeemer tied into bitterness? Because Miriam was so bitter of the fact of the Golus. She couldn't stand the Golus. And that she was waiting for the Gula. And this saying, Ad Masai, how much longer can we stand in such a deep, dark Golus? And she was very bitter over it. But she also knew the redemption was coming. And as a result of this bitterness, this brought the redemption. And this is a chiddush the Rebbe is saying, that when that the bitterness of the Golus, and you're saying Ad Masai, which we said before, we see when the Rebbe says if a person would yell Ad Masai until when Hashem, it's enough is enough, and we tell truly then that the exile would finish right away. So here the Rebbe is explaining that. Well, why do we see this? By Miriam, that she was very, very bitter of the difficulties that the Jews were having in exile, and by way of preference, the acquisition of a sage is on the verse, and Miriam the prophet, his sister of Aaron, took. The sister of Aaron and not the sister of Moshe. So it says over here, remember we said earlier, we talked about what happened when the Jews left Egypt, then they were by the miracles by the Red Sea. It says, and Miriam prophet is sister of Aaron. It says over there by the Red Sea, it says the sister of Aaron. Why it should say this, Moshe was the one who took the Jews out. Why doesn't it say the sister of Moshe? So why does it say the sister of Aaron? It says the sister of Aaron and not the sister of Moshe, since she was prophesying when she was the sister of Aaron. She was a prophetess. She already prior to the birth of Moshe. And she said, my mother is destined to give birth to a son who will rescue the Jewish people. She saw this. She was 4 years old. Or 3 years old probably, because he was born 3 years old, 3 to 4 years old. And she said, my mother is destined to give birth to a son who will rescue the Jewish people. This she saw. She prophesied this. And when they threw him into the Nile, her father arose and lightly spanked her on the head and said to her, what has become of your prophecy? He's saying here, he's going to be drowned in the Nile. This is why it says in the verse, and his sister stood from afar to see what will happen to him. She was standing, what's it mean? She was standing to see what's happening. She wanted to see what would be with her prophecy. Thus, the prophecy of Miriam was about the redemption. Who will rescue the Jewish people? She always was thinking, and from then on, she eagerly anticipated the fulfillment of prophecy. From then, once she had a prophecy, and that prophecy means wasn't just the fear, she was prophetic. Hashem, get this prophecy. A prophet comes from Hashem. And she says out a prophecy, and she knows this has to happen. So therefore, she knew that this prophecy, she's looking about the redemption. She's saying that Moshe Rabbeinu, she's standing afar, and Moshe Rabbeinu, little baby, is in the river, is going to drown to death. And she's standing afar, is equally saying to Hashem, what's going to be, when is the redemption? What's going to be with him? And from then on, she eagerly anticipated the fulfillment of upper prophecy, that when she was standing and seeing Moshe in the rift, she was very, very, very wanting so much Moshiach to come, the redemption. As I said, she stood from afar to see what will happen to her prophecy. And the longer the exile went on, she was embittered by the length of the exile, so much so that the bitterness is emphasized in her name, which expresses her essence, Miriam, named so due to the mirror. She was so upset of the difficulties the Jews went to. I know that I have heard once that the second Lubavitcher Rebbe, which is the Mittler Rebbe, he was known as, he was like, it's called Rechov Zanar, he explained things in such depth. And he really, really very special. And it says that the reason he died was because of gallbladder problems, because he was very bitter, because at that time the Russians were taking Jews, conscripting young Jewish boys into the army for 30 years. And he was very upset over that. And that's, when I was thinking of the bitterness of the Golus, he was very upset over that. Anyway, so the idea of being bitter over the Golus brings the Gula, is what it says. And through being bitter about the exile, this way is going to explain, Miriam named so due to the mirror, that's why she was named, and awaiting and yearning for the redemption. Not only you have to be bitter that we're in a deep Golus, but you have to want the redemption. You have to be waiting for Hashem to take us home right this second. You have to be waiting, and you have to know it's real. The Miriam knew that the redemption was real. It wasn't like a pipe dream. She knew it was real. And so therefore she was waiting to see, to actualize. It was a prophecy that Hashem had to fulfill. So therefore, okay. So therefore, to see what, so she stood to see what will happen to him. The Jewish people merited the redemption. Hashem appointed the Redeemer Miriam, which then the prophecy of Miriam was fulfilled. So therefore, let's go over this again. And through being bitter about the exile, Miriam named so due to mirror, and so once she was bitter and awaiting and yearning for the redemption, and she stood to see what will happen. Rebbe quotes the verse, and that means that she was waiting for the redemption. The Jewish people merited the redemption. So from her bitterness over the darkness of the Golus and wanting and yearning to see the final redemption, it says Hashem appointed a Redeemer Miriam. Miriam was appointed the Redeemer, which then the prophecy of Miriam fulfilled. Because only when she was standing over and she was so upset, then after that of her bitterness and her longing for the redemption that Jews should be taken up from Mitzrayim, then her prophecy was fulfilled. This is amazing sikha. So we see that the Miriam is like the source from everything. She's the source from Moshe Rabbeinu, she's the source from David HaMelech, and she was so concerned of the Jewish people and so bitter of the difficulties that we're having. At the same time, she was so sure about the redemption, and she knew that Hashem would take care of us. She was full trust in it. That's why it says they took out their instruments, because she was 100% sure that this dark Golus was ending right away, and Hashem would take us out, and she was ready. And to add that this idea is emphasized also regarding Rachel. The Rachel Imminent says when Rachel passed away, she wasn't buried with the other imams, she was buried on the way. The reason she was buried on the way is so she could go and cry for the Jewish people. She's called the mother of the Jewish people. That when the Jewish people were exiled from the land of Israel, Rachel went out to a gravesite and cried and beseeched mercy for them, as the verse says. And a voice was heard high up. Rachel is crying for her children, refusing to be comforted. And Hashem answers her, your efforts are rewarded, says Hashem. Your children will return to their borders. So here we see that also that the crying and the bitterness of the Golus, this brings the redemption. That even though the Rebbe, we've signed the Rebbe a few times and he was very, very upset. He was crying and very bitter over the difficulties of the Golus. So this is what we all have to have. We have to have this feeling of crying and bitterness that we should be right now in the Beis HaMikdash. But at the same time, we have to know that the Rebbe emphasizes that we know that we're going there any second, and that we shouldn't emphasize this part. We should emphasize the from Simcha. But anyway, we're reading this, so this is a good time to think about it. And the equivalent of the great bitterness over the exile, Mary named so due to mirror, was the great joy. What happened? The great joy over the redemption. equivalent to the paying of the reward. And the Miriam took the tambourines into her hand, and all the women followed after her with tambourines and dances. So here it is. So here she was so bitter, but when the redemption came, she had the greatest joy. Because as much as a person wants and pains over something, works at something so much, he gets the reward. And according to this, we can truly appreciate why the prophecy of Miriam, we're on page 155, and according to this second paragraph, and according to this, we can truly appreciate why the prophecy of Miriam regarding redemption is written in the verses regarding the Song of the Sea. So why is it rewritten? It says what's written when we're talking about the Song of the Sea, Ajash Moshe. It says, and Miriam the prophet, the sister of Aaron, took the tambourines in her hand, and all the women followed after her with the tambourines and dances. This is written in the Chumash, in the five books of Moses, in the Torah. And from when the Jewish people saw, why did they do this? For when the Jewish people saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore, and their fear of Egypt evaporated, the prophecy of Miriam regarding the redemption of the Jewish people was completely fulfilled. And therefore the joy of the redemption was complete with tambourines and dances. So it says that once the Jews saw, because until that time, the Jews were, it says the Egyptians were following them, that it says that Pharaoh sent certain of his military men to follow the Jews when they were leaving Egypt to see what they were doing. They were supposed to come back after 3 days, and when they kept going, that's when they came back, and then he ran after them. That was the whole story with the Red Sea. So it wasn't till, so therefore the Jews were always still afraid of Egypt, and they hadn't completely been released in a complete way. But when they saw them dead, their enemies died on the Red Sea, then they knew that the prophecy of Miriam was fulfilled, that their enemies were dead, and nobody was to stop them. That's why they took out tambourines and dances, because they knew this was going to happen. And the virtue of the women expressed in the Song of Miriam with tambourines and dances is emphasized even in the Haftorah, the culmination of the Torah portion, and Dvar sayings. And in the Haftorah, it talks about Dvar saying. Okay. Although we read the Song of Men, Moshe, and the Jewish people in the Torah portion itself, and also the Song of Jewish women, nevertheless, we do not read a Haftorah with the Song of Men, as on the 7th day of Pesach, when we read the Haftorah regarding the Song of David. So right now it's talking about, we don't, rather the Haftorah regarding the Song of the women, the Song of Dvar. And among the reasons for this is that the Song of the women, Miriam, was in a much superior manner than the Song of the men, with the tambourines and dancing and mentioned above. So that's why the Haftorah follows after the Torah portion. So we see the Rebbe is emphasizing, showing on here, that the Song of the women was much greater and much more important and much more wonderful than the Song of the men, Baruch Hashem. And based on what is known, that the Haftorah is related to the concept of exile. So we know that the Torah has to do with exile, that they made a decree against the Jewish religion that the Jewish people cannot read the weekly Torah portion from the Torah. So instead, they read the topic of the Torah portion from the prophets. So therefore, the Rebbe explains here, just to reiterate, that at a certain time there was a decree against the Jews to read the Torah. They were trying to take us away from the Torah. So the Jews instead, at that time, they would read a portion of the prophets that had to do with the topic in the Torah. So therefore, it has to be saying that we're going to have to mention that there has to be something special about the Song of Dvar that has to do with this week's portion, the portion they're talking about, Beshalach. So the Rebbe says, we may say, the Rebbe's going to bring us something brand new to look at, that the emphasis on the virtue of the women in Haftorah that Dvar is saying is mainly regarding the time of the exile. Just looking at 78. So it's mainly regarding the time of exile, that's saying of the women, namely that the virtue of the service of Jewish righteous women who are similar to Dvorah in the time of the exile, which in their merit and as their reward will go out of the exile into redemption. So the Rebbe is pointing out that from the Song of Dvorah, that especially talking about the Song of Dvorah, because it's mainly They're talking about this in the time of exile. So it's through the vote of the Dvar, the singing of the women, the vote of them being happy when, again, that they're voting in the exile, that they're going to take us out to the final redemption. We're on number 6, page 157. And more specifically, that in the beginning of the Torah, there's hinted to the main aspects of the service of Jewish women, which in their merit the redemption comes. The Rebbe is going to explain now what's so special, what is the merit, and what is the service that the women could do now to bring the Gula Shlema. This is what we're going to look at. This is what we're trying to understand. What's today? So it says, Dvar, a prophetess woman of the wife of Lepidus. What is the meaning the wife of Lepidus? What's the meaning of Lepidus? Was that she was not the wife of Baruch. Only this alludes to the fact that she would make wicks for the sanctuary, the tabernacle and she would make wicks. The 83 it says, and down below, and because of this she made these wicks, she merited to have the prophecy, the light of the Torah, and she acted a judge for the Jewish people. So making the wicks, what's the wicks? The wicks light up the sanctuary, the tabernacle of Shiloh, and similarly, the sanctuary found in every Jewish single home. So not only that in the tabernacle, but there's the sanctuary that's every Jew, an accomplishment of the Jewish women and daughters lighting the Shabbos and the holy candles to illuminate the entire house through the entire surroundings and the entire world, similar to the wicks of the sanctuary that the Dvar made, which illuminated the sanctuary and the entire world. From its light shine the world. So the Rebbe is saying here that how was she able to be so special? How was she able to be merited to be so special? That she made the lights that lit up the world for the menorah. That in the holy temple, the windows came in like this. Generally, when you want light inside, so you make the windows, they should either be equal or they'd be bigger on the inside, smaller on the outside. But in the holy temple, it's quite the opposite. Why? Because the lights weren't for the holy temple. The lights were for the world, to light up the world. So Dvar was involved in lighting up the whole world. So over here we have similarly that's why she merited to the whole idea that she would be a prophetess, and she merited that to be so special. So the same thing the Rebbe says, and when you light Jewish women, when women and daughters light Shabbos candles, they also illuminate the whole house. And that from their house, from you lighting Shabbos candles, the house shines up and the whole world shines up. 2. What time was we doing time?
About 27 minutes.
Okay. 2. Now 1, page 58. And we should sit under Dvar's, and it says Dvar would sit under Dvar's date palm. Why specifically under a date palm? A date palm is a big tree there's nothing on the side until way up, so there's no real shade. Because of the prohibition of yichud, that you're not supposed to be with somebody by yourself. A person and a woman should be alone with somebody by themselves. For it is tall and it doesn't have shade, and it has no branches towards the bottom of it. And no one can be secluded there with her as in a house. And this is the virtue of mind. She used to give judging and she would give advice and things, but she would do that when she was under the tree, because there's no question of her being immodest. And this is the virtue of modesty. The true honor of the king's daughter is her modesty, as emphasized also in the song of Dvar. From the women in the tent you shall be blessed. It says in her song, from the women in the tent you shall be blessed. Who are the women in the tent? They're Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, the demos, which is the foundation upon which every Jewish house stands. So therefore, by being tznius, this is the basis of the whole house. And based on this, we may explain also the culmination of the Haftarah, and it says, "And the land was quiet for 40 years." Although this is talking about everything after the war and everything, there was peace in the land for 40 years. Although this is not part of the words of Dvar, rather part of the words of the one who wrote the book, Shmuel the prophet. He wrote the book, which this alludes, or this hints to the fact that through the conduct of the Jewish women and the footsteps of Dvar, we merited the phenomenon of the land was quiet. They made peace, including the ultimate perfection. The land was quiet with the entering into the complete land of Israel. The Rebbe is saying we're merited From her we merited, in footsteps from her, and we merited the phenomenon that the land was quiet, and this will include the final redemption, when the land was quiet, and with the entering into the complete land of Israel, the land of the 10 nations, and the true and complete redemption, which is related in 40 years, is the closed mem, which is symbolized in number 40, that says to prosper of sovereignty. Now they bring, the Rebbe explains over here that 40 generally is there's called in Hebrew you have a mem and a mem sofit, a final mem. So therefore one is made one way, but the one that's totally closed is made is for the end. But when you read it over there in Yeshaya, when you look at it, it says that how it was written like a closed one. So the Rebbe explained that means prosperity, because there's nothing that got in their way. But you have to learn how, you have to look at it a little bit deeper. But anyway, the Rebbe is pointing out over here the main thing is that because of the work of the Jewish women, they were able to bring total peace. And this total peace was in times of Dvar, and this total peace will be now also because of the wonderful work of the Jewish women. They will also be able to bring total peace. So I just want to go on to tell you that we're going to go continue more talking about how wonderful the Jewish women are, and that Mitzvah Shem, that we should see this, the wonderful of the work from the Jewish women that they've done. We should see the fruits of their labor. We should be right away in the third base of Mikdash, dancing and singing with tambourines, and I'm sure the Jewish women will bring even more than what they brought out from Mitzrayim, and more joy. We'll see more and more, and I'm looking forward to seeing that today. So I goes up to everybody and be well.